We're moving now into equivalence rules. Now, in some ways, this may just seem like we're adding more rules to our list, but they are different. They're different from the rules that we've learned so far in that they are equivalence rather than implicational rules. Now, in a lot of ways, they will function similarly. I mean, you'll write a line, and if you're applying it properly, you put the rule out to the side, and it'll seem similar in that way. But there are some differences that if you don't pay attention to these, you could make mistakes that would result in an incorrect proof. So first of all, let's talk for a second about some attributes of something being an implicational rule. And let's take, for example, our implicational rule, addition. So the rule of addition tells us that if we have as a line in a proof some formula, let's call it P, then we can say in another line P or Q. And the rule of addition justifies going from there to there. It implies, you might say, this implies that. So notice you can move from here to here, and that is great. But what you cannot do is move from here to here. That is not okay. You can't have on some line P or Q and say in some other line just the letter P by rule of addition. Not okay. So, first of all, an implicational rule allows you to move from one thing to another. A second aspect of an implicational rule is that it has to be applied to a whole line. You cannot apply it to part of a line. So, for instance, let's say you had the rule simplification. Now, simplification tells us that if we have a conjunction, let's say A and B, then we can say just A, and that's fine. We can move from here to here. Similarly, if we had, say, in a line of a proof, a conditional statement that said, if you have A and B, then you could have C. We cannot apply simplification just to this half of the line. We can't now move to line 2 and say, by simplification, then if you have A, I'll put it in parentheses, then C. This move is not okay. Implicational rules have to be applied to entire lines, and the rule pattern that we're given tells us what type of statement you can apply it to. You can apply the rule simplification only to a line whose main operation is a conjunction. So similarly, if you're doing modus ponens, you can only apply modus ponens to a statement, or you have to have as a conditional statement, or as one of the lines, a conditional statement. It can't be the conditional statement's part of a larger statement. The whole thing has to be, as its main operation, a conditional statement. Okay, so two distinctions there. Implicational rules, you can move from what you're given to something new, but not back the other way. And you can only apply it to a whole line. Equivalence rules don't have those restrictions. So, for example, one of our equivalence rules is double negation. That tells us that, so I'll abbreviate it. Double negation tells us that if I have in some line P, I can then say, I'm going to now do a new symbol over here, not P. So, in any line where you have P, you could on the next line write not P and apply the rule double negation, and that's a perfectly fine move. Similarly, you can go the other direction. These two are equivalent. You can replace one for the other without changing the meaning. So if you had on a line not P, let's say we had an proof down here, we had not P, we could by the rule of double negation now say P, this would be from line 1, double negation. So notice we can move from this one to this one, or you can move from this one to this one. Secondly, you can apply it to part of a line. So if you had, let's say you had in some proof, you have not P arrow Q. And then in another line, you have P. Now, this is close to being something that you could apply modus ponens to, right? The rule of modus ponens tells us that if we have a conditional and then we have the antecedent, we can assert the consequent. But we don't quite have that yet. This is not the same as this, at least in the way it looks. Like the meaning's the same, but in the way it looks, it doesn't match the pattern. So we could apply the rule double negation just to this line and say here in line 3, P arrow Q from line 1 double negation. So look what I've done here. I've basically just taken this chunk of the line and applied the rule double negation to it to get this down here. Now these two premises look like my normal modus ponens pattern, and I could apply that rule. So notice the distinction. An equivalence rule, basically what it's telling us is that these two different formulas, they look different, but they mean the same thing. You can apply it to part of the line, and you can go either direction. Different from the rules we've learned so far, which are implicational rules, which you can only apply to an entire line, and it can only go from what you're given to what you're told you can say. I hope this distinction stays clear in your mind. Keep in mind which type of rule you're using. The rules that we're going to be learning going forward are all equivalence rules. So you'll just want to remember that the rules we've learned to this point have been implicational rules.